I'd like to call this recess meeting to order from the August workshop to finish up on this. Information items, department updates, the finances, Ms. Erica Setzer.
Good evening, Chairman Lawson, Superintendent Dr. Williamson, and board members. As Cole's bringing up the slide from the retreat, our first slide is just going to go over a budget summary for the 22-23 school year. I had hoped, like everyone else, we'd have a 23-24 budget to discuss, but as of today, we still do not. So again, I've presented this already, but to show what our 22-23 budget was by funding source, dollars and percentage of the total budget. As you can see, the state still represents the largest portion of funding we receive, followed by federal, which is much larger because of ESSER funding. Next slide, please, Cole. I also wanted to show the ADM changes and talk about ADM in a little bit of detail if I could. The North Carolina Public Schools Statistical Profile gives 5 different ways to show different student counts. The first one is by enrollment, the number of kids enrolled in your district. The second is ADM, or average daily membership. The third is average daily attendance. The fourth is the membership on the last day of school. And then the fifth includes promotion and non-promotion. So ADM is not a stagnant number. It is fluid. It changes month to month, and it can be looked at different ways depending on which report you're viewing. This also does not include our pre-K children. So sometimes our pre-K students are also added into our ADM. The reason I wanted to discuss that is to show our changes over the last 5 years. And as we're moving from the 22-23 year into the 22-23 to 23-24, we're seeing our first increase in our ADM. This is a 6th way we can look at ADM, and this is the allotment number that DPI uses to base the funding on. DPI has to have a stable number that doesn't change, so they do a projection every year. After the 2nd month, they review it, and if our changes are higher than 2% or lower than 2%, they make changes. As you can see here, we got our 10th day numbers today, and our enrollment is 20,658, and our membership is 20,499. So the difference in those two numbers are there still are some children who haven't shown up as far as the membership attendance yet. But we are well within that 2%, so there won't be any changes once we get a budget based on our ADM that DPI has of 20,668. Next slide, please, Cole. Thank you. I also wanted to show, with more than 80% of our budget going to pay salaries and benefits, I kind of wanted to show what that looks like when you look at some of our more prominent positions. So when we talk about the salaries, that's not the only part that we as a district have to pay. We start with the salary. From there, we have to pay FICA, which is 7.65% matching, retirement, which at the present is 22.94%, which could change, and hospitalization is $7,397 per person. So you'll see there's a big difference in what we pay the individual and what the total cost is to the district. And I included the teacher, TA, custodian, our child nutrition employees, instructional support, and assistant principals, some of the more popular positions there in the district. So you can see while we're paying a teacher on average close to $50,000, it costs the district over $73,000 to employ that teacher. So I just want everybody to understand that when we're looking at costs, there's a lot more built in than just the salaries. And also, these numbers do not include any supplements or additional stipends that we pay. That would be on top of this.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and then
Yes,
Erica, when you frame that around 10 and a half month positions, and you look at that total, it's really a great opportunity, correct?
Yes. Yes, sir. Next slide, please, Cole. And then we just wanted to show some counts. This is based on the 22-23 personnel summary. We call it the SS200 that Human Resources provides to DPI based on certified and classified position types. As you can see, we have 1,595 certified positions. That includes teachers, guidance, social workers, media principals, assistant principals, all licensed areas, and classified position counts, TAs, office support, custodians, child nutrition, and all other. Next slide, please, Cole. The Public School Forum every year releases a local finance study that ranks each county based on these 5 different measurables. One is funding effort. So that is the counties, if they can fund you, how well are they doing in funding you? And we rank kind of the middle of the row there, that while we have lower funding, our county is doing really the best they can as far as increasing revenue. Our property values don't generate, if we were to increase the property tax, doesn't generate as much funding as, say, a Wake County or other wealthier counties would. You'll see we rank either last or second to last in all other categories: ability to pay, our total local appropriations, our base appropriations, and again, as I mentioned, our property values. We rank the lowest out of all 100 counties. Next slide, please, Cole.
Dr. Manuel, hit your green button. I got you.
I want to go back to the last slide, please, ma'am. So are you saying to me, in 18 years, so you said it might be better since we've taught in a couple of years, a year or so, that our county commissioners are funding us the best they can, and they got a $30 million surplus? Or is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that out of their ability to generate additional revenue, we kind of rank in the middle of being able to do that they don't have the same ability to increase revenues as other wealthier counties do, that we're kind of in the middle of all the other counties. We're right around in the middle, so they could do better, but they're not, we don't rank 100th in that, like in the other categories. Does that answer your question?
No, ma'am, they could
Okay.
do better if they wanted to with a $30 million surplus.
This doesn't take into account their surplus. This just takes into account their ability to increase
Like, I want to
funding.
go on record saying that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Manuel.
You're quite welcome.
Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, the ability to pay takes into account,
The funding effort.
the funding effort takes into account their ability to pay and what they're actually doing. So that ranking of 56 out of the 100 counties considers the fact that where your property values are and what your appropriations are and what your ability to pay is. So and it does take into account whether they've got a surplus and everything else. So it's saying that ranking of 56 is saying that given where you're starting from, you're at the rank of 56 out of the 100 counties. That is, there are 55 that are doing better than you are, given where they're starting from and what their ability to pay is. And there are 44 doing worse than you are, given where they're starting from. But that funding effort includes their ability to pay.
Which is we rank 99th out of 100. So as he indicated, we're already at a lower starting point than a lot of the other counties in that ability to pay. And this is direct from the Public School Forum, a local finance study that they release every year. And we generally fall in these categories. If you go back 10, 15 years, we're going to fall in these same areas.
And Miss Erica, one thing, and I'm just using this for an example, if you're looking at Wake County and they were to do a 1 cent or what have you on on everything, it would generate $50 million.
Correct. A 1 cent increase in tax, either sales or property in that area would generate more revenue
And
than Robeson County
And if
has the
Rob-
ability.
Right, and if Robeson County did it, it would bring 5 million. So you're 45,
I don't know those differences exactly, but they
Right.
would be considerably different.
but that's what I'm trying
based
to
on the
explain.
property
There's just
values.
so much more, yeah.
Yes. Next slide, please, Cole.
Mr. Craig?
Oh.
Ms. Erica, with those numbers up there, if you go back to that slide again, the funding effort is the only way or the major way to change that, increase taxes? Is that the way to do it? I mean, is that one of the ways that funding effort would have to change? Or
Not
What's the
necessarily.
ways you could change that funding effort? I guess that's my question.
Not necessarily, just increase what our county appropriations are.
Right. So what would be ways that taxes would be one of them?
Could be one.
Which we know nobody wants to do.
Right, that could be one way, yes.
And then you'd
Or
have
the surplus,
surplus, the
yes.
surplus money that Dr. Mannion
Yes.
talked about.
Or a supplemental sales tax that would be directed for the school system.
Correct.
As Dr. Williamson has a I-95 corridor. If you're staying in a motel there, there's a 1% tax and it's all designated to the public schools of Robeson County. And I'm saying that to say, you know, if we go to Raleigh or Greensboro or somewhere and stay, almost every time you go to these places, you pay the tax or whatever, and then you might see whatever word they call it, occupancy tax or whatever. You see things like that. We don't have it here, because I know you would have opposition to it. But if it was done and designated, that would give us, to me, because people are going to stop on 95. But that's just one example.
We do have a 1/4 cent sales
Yeah.
tax that went into effect, but it was not specific for only education.
Okay. Thank you.
And I wanted to show this slide because, and again, this is 2021, but I wouldn't say that it's changed that much in that year. Orange County is the total on the left, 6,141. Orange County, the highest spending county in the state, spent $83 more per student than the 7 lowest counties combined. So Columbus, Graham, Duplin, Greene, Hope, Robeson, and Swain combined still spent more per child in local funding than Orange County in that year. And that,
Hit it again, Dr. Mannion.
I'm sorry.
I got you. Let's see. We got you.
So they spent more money, but now make sure I understand, is that more local money or all our money combined, federal and all?
this is
state?
local only,
Local
local appropriations.
So we're spending more money than Orange County local?
No.
What did you say now?
Orange County spent more than all 7 of
Oh, I
our
got it
districts combined.
backwards.
Yes, ma'am.
And Orange County is right outside of, help me somebody.
Chapel Hill.
Chapel Hill
Chapel
sits
Hill, okay, I've
sits
got
in
you now.
Orange County.
I got
Yeah.
you now.
Yes. The university.
All right, I was backward listening.
This is local only. And we tend to toggle between us and Swain as having the lowest per pupil for local. So it kind of go back and forth between us and Swain every year.
But if you reverse that, wouldn't you say we get more money per child if we get low well, federal and all? Wouldn't you say that? If you reverse it and added all the parts together?
If you added the pots together, it would not look this way. But remember, those funds have funding restrictions that local does not.
I
You-
understand that,
yes.
but I'm
It would look
saying,
different. It
it
would not
would.
look this way. No, it would not if you added in all the other pots. That's correct. And that is my entire presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Erica.
Thank you.
Any questions?
no, sir.
Human Resources? Ms. Thompson?
Good afternoon, Superintendent Williamson, Chair, Mr. Lawson, all other members of the board. Mr. Bobby and Dr. Carr just passed out some information to you that I will get to that a little bit later, but let's look at licensure first. I wanted to bring to your attention the types of license that an employee can get. A permit, which anyone with a 4-year degree can get a permit to teach. An emergency license is a 4-year degree plus 18 content hours in the area of the license. Residency license, that's a 4-year degree plus 24 hours, and then the university requires a 2.7 GPA. Limited license are those people who have completed all of their coursework, but they are yet to pass their praxis exams. And then, of course, we have CTE license, which they have their requirements depending on the area within CTE that they go in. So on a number of occasions, we've been asked how many employees we have that do not have a teaching license. Anyone in a teaching position has a teaching license of some sort, depending on their eligibility. So like the least amount of requirements you can have is the 4-year degree itself to become a teacher. And then, of course, you know, each year there are other requirements. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention because it is asked a lot of times, you know, how many people do you have in classrooms that don't have a license? They all should have a license, or we are in the process of applying for a teaching license. Okay, next slide, please. I'll go over quickly the personnel, which is pretty much the same as what Ms. Erica has just gone over. Classified personnel totaling 1,233. This past year, August 22 through 23, our resignations 149, retirement 66, a total of 215. This information was based on August the 11th and 12th when the retreat was originally scheduled. So at that time, we had employed 320 people with 48 still in process. At this time, those people have been processed, and there are additional people being processed. Then for the certified, we have a total of 1,595. Looking at resignations, 274, retirement 67, totaling 341. We have actually employed 405 people over the summer. Vacancies, the information that I've just given you, Mr. Bobby and Dr. Carr just passed out. This was issued from North Carolina School Superintendents Association. I just wanted to bring to your attention the vacancies in the last 3 years, 2021 and 22 and 23. Just looking at the K-5, for example, in 21, 954. The next year was 1,570, and this past year is 1,166. This was based on the first day of school. These vacancies were reported after our first day of school. And you can go across looking at the 6-8, 9-12, counselors, classified, bus drivers. I will tell you that we surveyed our district for bus drivers, and right now, this was August the 12th, we needed 27 more bus drivers. That's how many we were short or vacant. I've also attached for you, and like I said, this information was back in August, but this will give you a pretty good idea by school, the vacancies that we have from each school. For example, when we first started in August, Carroll Middle needed 5 K-6 teachers. Deep Branch, they just needed 1 music teacher at the beginning of school. And we wanted to break it down to let you know it's really not one school or one specific area. It is across the district, the vacancies. So I'll leave that with you. You can look at that, and if you have any questions, you can let me know.
Okay?
Are we short any AIG teachers? And I'll tell you why in a minute.
Okay, I think there's one position that we have not filled in AIG at this time. We did fill one at the beginning of the school year, but we have one additional position that we have not filled at this time.
Well, I got a call today, and this is from Magnolia, of course, and they have a AIG teachers 2 days a week, and I was told they have children not being served. Can somebody look into that for us?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. That's Magnolia.
Yes, ma'am, but they only had one 2 days a week. So I was thinking maybe there was a shortage or something.
Dr. Carr, can you address that, please?
You're on.
Okay, so currently, we do have the one opening. They redistributed the students across the district, and there's a lot of push-in services being provided instead of pull-out, because we're doing more of an inclusion model right now with AIG. And I know each school has, I want to say, Magnolia has about 78 students that are AIG, so that gives us a high number. So it may appear that it's not the same type of services that they're used to, but it's more of a push-in model now instead of
What is
serving.
that?
That means they go into the class like science and social studies or ELA and math and help support within the class to do AIG services. And they do some additional enrichment in K2. So there's a variety of services being provided based on the grade level.
I don't think that message has got to the parents. I don't know, maybe you or somebody, the principal. Parents see AIG as something, cream on the top of the cake, and they don't see that they're getting the services. Some parents, I didn't say all parents. So there is an issue at Magnolia with communication, and that their kids are not receiving services.
We can definitely get
Would
with
you-
Magnolia, yes.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Carr, I would just add that probably needs to be addressed countywide, especially if we're used to AIG being pulled out. You got 10 AIG kids, okay, they're pulled out, they go over here to this teacher. Okay, now, and it came up last night, now if we're leaving them in there with that inclusion, with a parent saying, my kid's not getting it. So that probably would need to be addressed to me countywide to make sure they understand it. My question, I said maybe this is a good time. Dr. Williamson, this probably be to you and maybe Miss Melissa. We know ESSER's running out. And I know we're looking at teachers here, but every so often we see we're hiring so-and-so and it's there's the funding. Of course, it takes care, it's this year. That's been explained to everyone. My question is, if we know it's running out, yes, we're going to try to get funding to keep these people. Do we need to start now or at some point near in the near future to not putting people in these positions, because we might have to go through this painful thing of saying you don't have a job next year. So it's just, I would like for us to look at that so we don't have a lot of that to go through, hopefully.
We've started that conversation this summer, and it is our intent to go before the commissioners and ask for additional local funding to support those positions. But we're aware of that, and we're having that conversation. But that is our intent.
Okay.
Okay. And next, before we go to Kelly, I gave you a handout last time. You may or may not have this handout, but I just wanted to bring a couple things to your attention. This is the teacher turnover information that I printed from DPI. And just a couple of things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Where we're not at the absolute lowest level as far as attrition rates, we're not at the highest either. On page 15, it shows the top 5, the highest counties, and then it shows the lowest 5 counties. So We're not fortunate to be in the 5 lowest, but we're also not to the disadvantage that we're in the top 5 either with the highest attrition rates. I hope that you had time maybe to look through some of this. I think it'll answer a lot of questions about vacancies, attrition rates, people leaving. We only look at our county, we only consider what's going on here, but if you take a look statewide, we're not the worst. And like I was just saying, we're not at the top, we're not at the bottom. So, of course, we strive to improve every day, but you will see a lot of information that shows that, we're not at the bottom of the barrel. I wanted to bring that to your attention. And then I highlighted several other things in that packet you can look at your own time. And then if you have questions, let me know. One other thing that I printed for you last time was on a large sheet. And this is the reasoning that people have left the district. I know Mr. Gentry has asked a couple of times, but it was a long sheet like this. And it doesn't give you the teacher's name, but it does give you, tells you that it's a classroom teacher, the area of their license, and why that person left the district. And you will see a lot of it is retirements. Sometimes it has to do with their teaching license. But again, you can look over that, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to talk with you about that as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the Kelly education. So I know some of you have heard different things about Kelly going on, but overall, and Miss Jessica and Dr. Carr are passing out a sheet for you to let you know, as of last week, what our percentages look like. And if you look, you can see that most are in the 90s, some are at 100%. It tells you how many were filled, how many were unfilled, and how many were requested. Then it gives you the percentage. And looking at the fill rate for this time last year, it has improved from 73.8% fill rate on 450 absences in 2022 to a 96.8% fill rate on 1,665 absences in 23 thus far. Now, we do know that a lot of absences were not put in Smart Find. So this company is going to give us the information that we've really been searching for, that the other company could not give us, and that is, exactly how many absences do we have each day? Where are these absences? And we're going to be able to look for trends and see exactly what's going on and where. So again, this time last year, we were at 73.8% fill rate, and that was based on 450 absences, compared to a 96.8% fill rate based on 1,665 absences. So I wanted to let you know about that. Go back one more time. I also wanted to make you aware that any of our teachers from this past school year that were not able to meet licensure requirements, they were given the option to become Kelly employees while they satisfy those requirements and become eligible to get back into the classroom as a teacher. Tonight, I will be talking to you about an addendum for Kelly. And this is, I know you heard a lot of conversation about bus drivers wanting to substitute as well as drive the bus. So what we have done is we have an agreement with Kelly that if there's any overtime, that PSRC will pick that up, that we will pay that overtime. And so I will talk to you about that during the board meeting to see if we can get approval moving on that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and Erica, you can answer this. We've done that all along, so that is not a new part of money that we're spending, correct?
I got you.
That's correct. That has been processed the entire time. It's just now that we have to get the data differently, because before we got all the data here through our payroll department. So we have to have that addendum to allow Kelly to give us the data as they're serving as a sub, as we don't get that presently. So that's the reason for the addendum.
Okay, and just looking at the PowerPoint, we had right at 600, actually almost 700 that were grandfathered in. That was substitutes that were employed with PSRC that are now Kelly employees. And they continue to process the newer people and get them to work as soon as they possibly can.
Dr. Manuel?
Would you go back to the field rate page, the green page, please, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
You have, I'm speaking specifically of Red Springs Middle, Red Springs High School, and W.H. Knuckles. All right, they were able to fill the first school 84% of the vacancies, of the absentees of teachers. Is that correct?
And you're looking at W.H. Knuckles?
No, I'm looking at Fairmont Middle School.
Right.
All right, what happened to the others, quote, almost 16%? What do they do? How do they get a sub then?
So we are working on that. There were 3 at 80, around 85%. And I have spoken with Kelly about that, and we're trying to see, what was the issue? Did people call in last minute? Did that take, was that an issue? People didn't call in like early enough, and that's why we were not able.
I'm just curious though, what happened to the children? Who took care of the children? Did the principal get somebody in there? That's my concern, more or less the children.
Okay. So they have been asked not to use teacher assistants.
Right.
So therefore, as a principal, you got to make some decisions. And what I mentioned to some other board members is, as a principal, if I were told not to use a TA, what would I do? Well, sometimes you have to cancel resource. As long as those children get the PE they are supposed to get by law, we can still maybe pull a resource teacher. So you've got to be creative. You got to think outside the box. They may have a list of their own of Kelly subs that they may reach out and try to bring in.
So the short answer, those that's not 100%, the principal had to take care of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
You got something in? Gotcha.
I've had a lot of phone calls concerning Kelly education. It's been with folks that has worked to the point that they pretty much considered being a substitute teacher or fill-in teacher, I should say, a full-time job. And they're saying that when they get a text, their phone bings that there's a job vacancy, and before they can answer it, it's gone. Or if they answer it the next morning, that it may be gone. So the question by a lot is, how is Kelly's system working? Do they randomly send so many jobs out to a quadrant of people? Or does it go to that total, 700 members at one time? Or does it go by the pool that's recommended for that particular school? There's just a lot of questions that the public has around that.
Okay.
And some are asking if they need to go out and look for them a job that actually stayed with us the whole entire year. I'm afraid we're going to lose them.
Mm-hmm. And so these are folks who are not actually long-term subs, but they normally work every day in different positions, maybe different schools, different grades. Okay. First, I would ask that those people reach out and let us know who they are and where this is occurring. But I will have to find out exactly how that system works as far as the call that goes out, who it goes out to, first, last. I know in the beginning when we were having conversations, it was going to go out to, let's say, Melissa Thompson said she only wanted to work at WH Knuckles. So it would, they would go to those particular people who had asked for certain schools. But if it's happening to individuals, I ask them to please just reach out, let us know who they are, where they are, so that we can find out where the problem is, because we don't want to lose anybody.
Okay. Mr. Craig?
Ms. Thompson, since we get contacted about, okay, what can I do about Kelly education? And, calling the switchboard here sometime can be very busy. And I think Ms. Cummins has been hired as the person with Kelly. Can we, as board members, get a phone number that all we need to do is say, look, call this lady. I know Kelly Education's got an 800 number. And I understand sometime now, if you call that 800 number, they're saying, okay, you have a person there now, that's who you need to contact. So can we get that contact information through number, ever how means that we can share it with people, to maybe get part of what Mr. Henry's saying, get those folks on the right track? Because we
Yes.
know with this big number, some people got lost through the cracks that might have been subbing, but now they're not for whatever reason. And I'm going to say, there's a reason there, but we just need to make sure we get them back, because we don't want to lose people. That was one of the big things we talked about, is not losing people who's been dedicated to us for years, because that's just going to put, to me, a bad taste in their mouth. And like I said, I've heard some good things about it, but we need to make sure we get those folks in. So if we could get a number, I think that'd be helpful.
And Ms. Cummins does have a number here, at 671-6000. I will email all the board members her extension
Okay,
so that they can have a direct line to call Ms.
Okay.
Cummins.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Any other questions?
we're good.
Thank you.
Public Relations, Ms. Seeley?
Good afternoon, good evening, Chairman Lawson, Superintendent Dr. Williamson, and board members. So it has been such a pleasure this past year to work as the Chief Communications Officer for the Public Schools of Robeson County. It's been rewarding work to share our stories of success and growth, and I'm so looking forward to this new school year. It's been challenging so far, but it's worth the while. It's wonderful, rewarding. I'll go over a few things that I'm working on across departments. We have our crisis plan. We're working on, all of our schools already have crisis plans in place, but we want a uniform crisis plan. There we go. To better serve, better respond in the time of crisis at different schools. And we will have a meeting in October with different individuals like local law enforcement partners, members from the hospital, across multiple agencies, the Lumbee tribe, and we'll talk about different ways that we can maybe revise our draft and make it the best it can be. And then we'll bring it before you guys for approval. Next slide. Okay, so, and we also have social media guidelines this year. So our social media guidelines are in place for our different school-run social media channels. They basically are a roadmap to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. A lot of it is common sense, but it's just guidelines. Guidelines are good to have in place for people to know exactly what to do, where the lines are, what to cross, what not to cross. And then upcoming events. So these are a few upcoming events. We also have in your packet that was given out to you a whole list of events at our schools, different schools in September. And that's for your review. And I believe that is all. We're continuing, of course, to work to the best of our ability to update our website, to reach out to our parents, make sure everybody's informed, and to continue to enhance our communication to best serve our stakeholders within the public schools of Robeson County. Any questions?
Chair, if I may, please.
Yes, sir.
Jessica, for our crisis management plan, that meeting will involve other agencies. Would you talk about that, please?
Absolutely. We've reached out to multiple agencies, again, local law enforcement, the hospital, DSS. We wanted to get different perspectives from different folks who are specialized in their own areas. That will be October the 6th, I believe, here at Central Office. And again, we will talk to them. We'll talk to our principals, get some feedback on that plan, and really talk it out and how we can apply it and make sure that, again, our response is the best that it can be at our schools in the time of a crisis. Again, they already have their own crisis plans at our different schools, but this is just a uniform plan that we can make sure we're covered on all bases. Everybody's covered the same. Response is pretty much easier because our law enforcement know, exactly the uniform plan and again, just to enhance our response in the time of a crisis.
Mr. Craig?
Ms. Jessica or Mr. Bobby, can you give us on a given day, how many schools have an SRO officer at a school? Because I know we got some, they move around. So with our 39 or so schools, do we have an officer at 25 of them or 30 of them? Because we know we got some gaps.
Do you have a better?
It's not doing that, Mr. Bowman. Your card might be out, Mr.
Yeah.
Bowman.
My subscription might be ran out. But
Yeah, pay the bill.
Mr. Craig, to answer that question, all of our high schools have at least 2 resource officers every day. Our middle schools that have resource officers every single day would be Pembroke Middle, Wilmington Junior, Red Springs Middle, St. Paul's Middle. And that covers all of our middle schools that have resource officers every day. All of the other schools would share a resource officer, in the way that we design those resource officers would be proximity. So like the Career Center is partnered with Deep Branch. LAP is partnered with Southside. So it's just a matter of minutes before an individual could get from one school to the next school.
So maybe we have 20 working, 25 in the IUF,
Yes,
something
yes,
like
but
that.
I can get you a definite
Okay.
count on how many, how many would not have a resource officer per
On a
day.
given day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say something. This is a positive.
I had you on, Dr. Manuel,
You
hang
was on
on.
and you cut it off.
I don't know what's wrong with it tonight.
There you go.
I got you.
I want to say the call to action, though, regardless of where they're stationed, should be applauded. I was at a school the other day when there was an incident, and it was just amazing, the call to action, how they came and took care of it, and also the administration at the central office. I just want to applaud them. I was amazed. I just happened to stop in and just ran into it, and I was just amazed, and I want to thank them for taking care of our children in our schools. And that's it.
That's it. Ms. Seeley, I'd just like to say, along with your law enforcement agencies and stuff, to contact, like in Robeson County, Firemen's Association, volunteer, not only the paid city departments, but your volunteers are the first responders to a call, normally at a school or something. So that would be a good thing to look into.
And we've invited Miss Stephanie Chavis, our fire marshal,
Right.
county fire marshal.
Emergency director, yeah,
Mhm. So she's on there too,
okay.
but I can add some more people if I need to.
Right.
On there. Yes, sir.
But she can get them,
She can get them
involved.
there.
Yes.
She can get them in place. She sure
yes, one
can.
phone call.
She sure can.
Okay.
As always, if there's no more questions, as always, I appreciate the opportunity to serve and to continue sharing our stories of success, improvement, and growth. Communications can be challenging, but this work, again, is the most rewarding work I've ever been a part of. And thank you again for this opportunity to serve. No.
Our attorney at this time, Mr. Schwartz. I don't have to set a timer for you or anything, do I? He's got some. I'm gonna let him
Okay, we're going to start this now and finish it as part of the regular board meeting. I was very, very hopeful yesterday, based on some conversations I had with some legislators, that I might be able to come here and tell you that the implementation for the Parents' Bill of Rights is going to be extended until January. As of some information I got early this morning, that's off the table. That extension that's been requested by DPI, I'm told, is definitely not going to fly. So, we were also told that we were going to see the budget this week, and that may not fly. So it's like anything else in the General Assembly. It's not final until it's final. So wait and see. But the latest information I have is that the requested extension for implementation on this is dead as a doornail. With that said, the Parents' Bill of Rights is now in effect. And we may or may not see an extension of it. And Cole, you gave me a dead one here. Let's see what we got. Is this on?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And Patty, they have this presentation.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit, just slightly. It's mostly the same, but it's slightly changed. So this is an overview of what the Parents' Bill of Rights does. It's broken up into 3 different parts. The first part of this adds a new chapter to the general statutes, chapter 114A, that is solely dealing with the Parents' Bill of Rights. The second part amends a number of the public school law statutes in chapter 115C of the general statutes, and by adding a whole new section dealing with the public school unit requirements. So this applies to not just LEAs, but also to charter schools as well. And then part 3 makes changes in the medical treatment of minors, and that deals with changes to chapter 90 of the general statute. So we're going to break this up into some of the different parts. But again, let's talk about what this does. So what the Parents' Bill of Rights does is it enumerates a number of different statutory rights dealing with parents and their relationship to education, privacy, safety of their children, medical treatment of their children. And it requires public schools to do a number of different things to provide information to parents and to get them involved in schools. It gives them some control, if you will, over certain things dealing with their child's education as well as medical treatment. And it requires public school units to notify parents about a lot of different things that you'll see as we go on, dealing with the student, their physical health, their mental health, what's going on with them in the schools, whether or not we can teach certain topics in the early grades of kindergarten through grade 4. And it also requires healthcare practitioners to get certain permissions and written consents before they take any action. So let's look at the legislative history of this, because it's somewhat instructive as to what's happened, and it gives some clues as to where it's going to. So this was a high priority piece of legislation. It was introduced very early on in the General Assembly before the end of January at the start of the long session. There were several different versions of the bill as it went through the General Assembly, and the third version of the bill passed initially in the House, even though it was a Senate bill. So the bill got changed around several times, and it passed in the House by a vote of 66 to 47. Now, early on, there was also discussion that this, whatever came out, was going to get vetoed by the governor. So the House and the Senate both have veto-proof majorities of Republican members. The House got its veto-proof majority when one member switched parties. So a veto-proof majority is 3/5 of the members present at the time the vote is taken. So if all the members of the House are present, 3/5 is 72 out of 120. If all the members of the Senate are present, that's 30 out of 60. Okay, but if they're not all present, then it's 3/5 of whomever's present. So as you see, when it passed the House, it was not a veto-proof majority of all members present. It was 66, not 72 votes. And then it crossed and passed the Senate with 26 to 13, which is a 2/3 majority of the members present, okay, more than 3/5, but not 3/5 of the total membership of the Senate. So it passed along party lines almost exactly. There was one House Republican who voted against the bill. And then on July 5, Governor Cooper vetoed the bill. And there's his veto stamp on the bill. And in the veto message, here's what the governor said. He said, parents are the most essential educators for their children, and their involvement must be encouraged. But this bill will scare teachers into silence by injecting fear and uncertainty into classrooms. This Don't Say Gay bill also hampers the important and sometimes life-saving role of educators as trusted advisors when students have nowhere else to turn. The rights of parents are well established in state law, so instead of burdening schools with their political culture wars, legislators should help them with better teacher pay and more investments in students. Therefore, I veto this bill. So that was on July 5th. The governor vetoed the bill, and the next day it went back to the Senate because it started out as a Senate bill, and the Senate referred it to the Rules Committee. And so the Rules Committee is sometimes like a parking garage for bills in the General Assembly, and it's where bills go until the leadership determines that they either need to go to a committee or they're ready to pop out, because when they're counting noses and counting votes, they figure they've got enough votes to deal with whatever they need to. So on August 16th, they had counted noses and counted votes and figured out who was going to be present in the General Assembly. And on August 16th, the bill popped out of committee and went to the Senate floor for a vote, and it passed 27-18. So that 27-18 is exactly 3/5 of the members who were present, okay, if you do the math. And the vote was strictly along party lines, and then went over to the House the same day, and it passed 72-47, again, strictly along party lines and with the exact number of votes that were needed to override the veto. So there wasn't a single vote to spare to override the veto, and on August 16th, this became law, okay, with an effective date for most of the pieces of this legislation of August 15th. So the General Assembly went back to the future. August 16th, they passed a bill that became effective the day before they passed it, okay, before the veto was overridden. So that's the legislative history on this. And so let's take a look at part one. And part one is the new chapter in the general statutes that deals only with Parents' Bill of Rights, a whole chapter of new law dealing with this. So a lot of this stuff deals with the upbringing of minor children. And what I've done in this presentation is I've tried to show you the different laws that already are on the books dealing with certain aspects of the Parents' Bill of Rights. So these are statutes that were already on the books. We've got compulsory attendance requirements. Kids have to go to school, all right? We've got access to student education records and the right to opt out of certain surveys. We've got federal law, HIPAA, which deals with the right to review healthcare records of parents. We've got in Chapter 90, which was amended in the Parents' Bill of Rights, limits on a minor's ability to consent to certain treatment and limitations on the ability of healthcare practitioners to treat a minor without parental consent. Then we've got in the public school laws, a General Statute 115C42.5, limitations on collecting biometric data, and in 115C47, which is the powers and duties of local boards of education, subsection 56 is notification of the Board of Education to parents of a child who's alleged to have been the victim of a crime in school. All right, so those are all pre-existing law, state and federal, dealing with some of the same things that are dealt with in the Parents' Bill of Rights. So now let's go to, in part one of the Parents' Bill of Rights, the new chapter 114. We have certain definitions. A child is somebody who's less than 18, who has not been emancipated. A parent is somebody who has legal rights to the child, not just any caretaker. Okay, it's got to be a legal guardian or a natural parent or an adoptive parent. The state is defined very broadly in this. Ordinarily in the statutes, when we refer to the state, we're referring to the state of North Carolina and state agencies. Okay, ordinarily a reference to an employee of the state would not include school officials, because school officials are employees of the local board of education, a political subdivision of the state. So usually when we refer to employees of the state, we're not referring to employees of a local board of education. But in this chapter, whenever they're referring to an employee of the state, it includes employees of any public school unit. Okay, so that's a really important distinction to keep in mind. So we have a new section 114A10, the Parents' Bill of Rights, and this articulates a number of different things that parents have the right to. So they have the right to direct the education and care of their child. All right, now stop and think about that. What does that mean, to direct the education of their child? What's that?
Choose the facility, whether it's private school or.
Choose whether they go to private school or public school or charter school or homeschool or something like that, maybe, okay? That's what we traditionally have thought of it as, okay? But it's not defined here, okay? So what does this actually mean? How far can a parent go to direct the education of their child?
Any school they want in our district.
Any school they want in our district, maybe. How about going into the classroom and directing what the teacher will teach? Or what they won't teach? Or how they will teach? Or, what does that mean? So this is one of the concerns in this law is, what does that mean? How far does it go to direct the education of their child? It's vague. It's vague, okay? And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about at the end of this is there are some things in here that are vague, that are unclear, and one of the big concerns about that is for educators, where's the line? And if you don't know where the line is, and you don't know whether you're going to step on it or over it, you might step away from it and back off, and it might have a chilling effect. And that's one of the concerns here with some of the vague language in the Parents' Bill of Rights. Second is to direct the upbringing and moral or religious training of their child. All right, well, what does direct mean? How far does it go? All right, third is to enroll their child in a public school or non-public school and in any school choice options available to the parent for which the child is otherwise eligible by law in order to comply with compulsory attendance laws. Now, this is not well drafted, okay? This language is unclear and it's not well drafted, and stop and think about what this can mean. All right, when I first looked at number one and said direct the education of their child, Henry said in response to what does that mean? It means they can select whether they go to traditional public school, a charter school, a private school, a home school, a religious school or not, or a virtual school or whatever, okay? But then what does number three mean if that's what number one means? Okay, number three is to enroll their child in a public or non-public school and in any school choice option available to the parent for which the child is otherwise eligible by law. So what does that mean? Does that mean that they can go to any school in order to comply with compulsory attendance laws, okay, public or not? Or does it mean that they have the right to go to any school for which the child is otherwise eligible by law? So they're otherwise eligible by law to attend the public schools of Robeson County. Do they have a choice as to which school they will attend? Or does otherwise eligible by law include the law that gives the Board of Education the right to select the attendance boundaries and assign students to particular schools?
If it couldn't, I have a statement, which I'm not a lawyer, but I want to ask you something. Am I on?
Here's the mic.
Board policy, now, Mr. Lawyer, I'm a shade tree lawyer, okay? Board policy doesn't supersede state law, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a state law. I could go, I'm going to challenge you. You're the superintendent and I'm the parent. I want my child to go to Tanglewood, but I live in Fairmont. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm going by state law.
I understand what you're saying. And what I'm going to say to you is, as the board attorney and the superintendent, because you just appointed me both. Thank you. Sorry, Freddie. And what I'm going to say to you is that state law also gives to the Board of Education the authority to assign that student. Okay? But this says otherwise eligible by law in order to comply with compulsory attendance laws. So, we may see some litigation or some arguments here. Okay, next one is easy. To access and review all education records is authorized by FERPA. Well, it's authorized by FERPA, so they already have that right. So no problem there. Next is to make healthcare decisions for their child unless otherwise provided by law, including Article 1A of Chapter 90, which is amended in Part 3 of this law. Then to access and review all medical records of their child as authorized by HIPAA, except in the event that there's an investigation dealing with a crime that might have been committed by the parent or abuse or neglect complaint by the parent, or where it's otherwise prohibited by law. So that doesn't really change anything. That's in federal law, that's HIPAA already. And then it goes on to say, parents have the right to prohibit the creation, sharing, or storage of a biometric scan of their child without the parent's written consent, except as authorized pursuant to a court order or otherwise required by law. So, and that's in the juvenile code. So what does that mean? We do biometric scanning of kids? Okay, we don't yet, but we might, in the future, we might do with, like the iris scans that people get now for TSA. Next is to prohibit the creation, sharing, or storage of their child's blood or DNA without parental consent or a court order. Don't know where that's coming from. I don't know of a whole lot of school systems that are doing that. But it could come up in a biology class, I guess. Next is to prohibit the creation by the state of a video or voice recording of their child without the parent's consent, except if it's during a court proceeding or an investigation under the juvenile code for abuse or neglect, or a criminal investigation, or there's an exception when the recording will be used for a safety demonstration, or for an academic or extracurricular activity or classroom instruction, or for photo ID cards or security or surveillance. And then to be promptly notified if an employee of the state, and that would include an employee of the school system now, suspects a criminal offense has been committed against the child, unless the incident has first been reported to law enforcement and child welfare agencies, and notifying the parent would impede the investigation because the parent may be the subject of the investigation. So throughout this document, what I've done is I've stuck in here the recommended policy updates from the policy listing service, the PLS service from the School Boards Association, so that you've got that for easy reference to that policy. And they're recommending changes to the parental involvement policy and the criminal behavior policies that you'll see there, as well as the staff responsibilities policies. Moving on to the next statute in this first part one, in Chapter 114, we have a new limitation on the rights to parents. So the requirements of this article don't authorize a parent to engage in any unlawful conduct or abuse or neglect, and they don't prohibit any state official or employee, and again, that would be a school official, from acting in their official capacity, but they also put in here within the reasonable and prudent scope of their authority. So what does that mean? It doesn't prevent you from acting in your official capacity as long as it's within not only the scope of your authority, but the reasonable and prudent scope of your authority. So what does that mean as a protection from a state official or employee acting in their normal capacity? And is that vague? What does it mean? Okay. It also doesn't prevent a court of competent jurisdiction from acting in its official capacity, again, within the reasonable and prudent scope of its authority, or issuing an order otherwise prohibited by law. There are penalties in this law, and it says an employee of the state, and again, that would include any school employee, any school official, who encourages, coerces, or attempts to encourage or coerce a child to withhold information from their parent may be subject to disciplinary action. So stop and think about the many kinds of conversations that school employees have with kids of all ages about all kinds of things. All right? In any of those conversations, they may not encourage, coerce, or attempt to encourage or coerce a child to not tell their parents something. All right? And that covers everything, no matter what the subject is. Craig?
Might not be the right time, but, okay. Let's just go back to being at school every day with sixth graders. Where does this put us with that kid that gets hurt in the classroom? What can that teacher who, for years, the nurse is not there, they give the kid a Band-Aid, put a Band-Aid on the child, take care of the child, whatever. Now, is this saying, again, when we talk about crossing that line, is this saying, okay, you better not do that? Or is it still vague?
No.
Can you do that?
You can tell them that, but you better not do what?
Like, provide some first aid to that child. They're cut, they're bleeding.
No, they can still do that.
They can still do
They can
those
still
kind of
do that.
things.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a more serious question.
Okay.
And it goes to this, okay. A child comes to me, I'm the teacher, and says, and this is horrible, my stepfather has sexually abused me. Are you telling me that I must contact the parents and tell them that? I
No.
know that I've got to go to social service.
You go to social services at that point.
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand that.
Yep.
But if it said we must contact the parents, it doesn't define something of that serious nature.
Yeah, we'll get to that part later on, but you still have to report that to social
Oh, I
services.
understand that.
Yep.
But I didn't want to call dad and say, hey, dad.
No, you're not required to call dad about that. Okay. And then all employees of the school board are included in this definition. So keep that in mind. All right. So summarizing part one of the Parents' Bill of Rights, it creates a new chapter in the general statutes, establishes a list of enumerated rights for parents. It clarifies limits on parental rights, and it establishes that any public school employee who encourages or coerces a child to withhold information from their parent can be disciplined. Okay, there are already federal and state laws that provide a number of these different rights that are enumerated in the Parents' Bill of Rights. So for example, FERPA requires that parents have the right to opt out of certain surveys and withhold consent from their child participating in certain surveys. The PPRA, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendments, requires local school boards to develop policies regarding student information, privacy and parental access to information. And then we've got Chapter 90 of the general statutes that limits a child's ability to consent to certain medical treatment and protects the right of the parent to withhold consent for medical treatment of their child. So those are some things that are already addressed in the law. So now we move into part two, which deals with the amendments to the public school laws, Chapter 115C of the general statutes. And this adds a new Article 7B to the public school laws. These laws became effective on August 15th, actually August 16th, when the veto was overridden. Okay, but the effective date in the legislation is August 15th, 2023. So all of this is currently in effect, beginning with the 2023-24 school year. And you'll see as we go along that while it's legally in effect, it's not really in effect because nobody's done it yet. And there's stuff we can't do yet. So that's why the State Board of Education and DPI were asking for the General Assembly to give some dispensation on this. So let's start again with pre-existing law, the stuff that's already on the books that is partly dealt with in part two of the Parents' Bill of Rights. So we've already got an annual decision for participating in sex education programs. Parents can make an annual decision. We've got medical and religious exemptions from immunization requirements. We've got federal law and state law dealing with requests to have their child evaluated for disability. We've got state law dealing with the purchase of textbooks and other supplementary instructional materials and the right of parents to inspect that material. We've got, and to object to that material as well. We've got in the powers and duties of school boards, 115C47, and in Article 8B, access to report cards that have been issued and any information on the state's education system and guidelines. We've got 40215, annual notice of opportunity to opt out of disclosure of information that's protected under FERPA or the PPRA. We've got promotion requirements for third graders that they'll be able to read at the end of third grade in the Read to Achieve program. We've got policies for increasing parental involvement in student achievement. And we've got local boards encouraging eligible secondary students and parents to enroll in advanced courses. So those are all in pre-existing laws. A lot of what part 2 of this law does is bring a lot of that stuff together and then add on to it. So here's the underlying policy that's in the Parents' Bill of Rights. It says the General Assembly finds that parental involvement and empowerment is fundamental to the successful education of all students. To strengthen partnerships among parents and school personnel, public school units and all public school unit personnel shall fully support and cooperate in implementing a well-planned, inclusive, and comprehensive program to assist parents and families in effectively participating in their child's education. I don't see anything in there that anybody in this room would probably object to, okay? It's a good policy statement of what we would hope to have in what we're trying to do in this, what the General Assembly's trying to do in this law, in this policy statement, is get parents more involved in the education of their child. All right? So nothing much to object to here. Same definitions of child and parent as in the first part of the bill. Definition of a principal is somebody who's employed as a principal or the staff member with the highest decision-making authority. Same thing for superintendent. School personnel includes any employee of the school unit. And that includes full-time employees, part-time employees, substitutes, everybody except volunteers. Whoops. It's custodians, bus drivers, clerical, everybody. It also includes any independent contractors we have who are doing the duties that would ordinarily be considered school duties. So the folks from Kelly Education, okay? It would include a contracted occupational therapist or a speech pathologist. So it would be anybody who's serving in a role that would ordinarily be done by school employees. This is an outline of what's in part 2 of the Parents' Bill of Rights. And we are right at 5:45. Do you want to take a break between now and when we pick up? Okay. All right. So we can take a break now and come back to this, and I'll try and race through the rest of it at the appropriate point in the agenda of the main meeting. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? No. Motion carries. I'd like to call this meeting September the 12th, 2023 to order. Invocation, Mr. Trey Britt. Mr. Dennis Harrell is here. I got you.
At this time, I'm gonna call up a good friend of mine. He was actually a pastor at Hyde Park Baptist Church here in Lumberton for 25 years, chaplain for Rust Enterprises for 10 years. He's currently serving at Pleasant Hope Baptist Church. He does have ties to public schools of Robeson County. Both his daughters, one currently teaches at Lumberton High School, and the other was actually the public school of Robeson County Teacher of the Year in 2010. So at this time, I want to call Pastor Dennis Harrell up to the invocation.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity of being here tonight. And it's good to see some familiar faces. I see Randy, and I remember our first kind of encounter. First year you ran for office and for school board. And I remember meeting him on a back road over somewhere on the other side of Fairmont, right?
Correct.
That's where we met. Yeah, okay. So it's good to be with y'all tonight. And thank you for the work that you do, trying to provide for our teachers and students, quality education for them. And because I believe that the key to our county is a good education. I've always believed that. Of course, you've heard my two girls are involved in education. Both of them started, or Sherry started here and got married and moved off. So anyway, but I believe in education, and I just wished I'd have taken better advantage of the educational opportunities I had as I was growing up and becoming a young man. But anyway, I'm thankful for what I did have. I just wished I had even more. As much as I believe in education, there's something I believe that is above education, that is needed more than education. And I believe what we need beyond education is what the Bible describes as wisdom. We have a lot of educated people in our society today, and I'm thankful for them. But I'm afraid that wisdom is something I see that's often lacking. And the Bible says a lot about wisdom, about our need for wisdom, about the wisdom that we can get from God that He's willing to give to us. The book of Proverbs has a lot to say about wisdom, and it's written by the second wisest man that ever lived on this earth, so we are told. The wisest man, of course, is the Lord Jesus Christ, and the Bible says that He grew in wisdom. So if He grew, we need to grow too in wisdom. And but the Bible has a lot to say about wisdom, and the book of Proverbs has a lot to say. In fact, it says something interesting about our need for wisdom. It says only a fool would despise wisdom and discipline. Only a fool would despise wisdom and discipline of life. James tells us where wisdom comes from. If you're familiar with the scriptures, you know this verse of scripture. He says, if you need wisdom, in other words, if you want to know what God wants you to do, just ask Him, and He's willing to tell you. Okay? He's willing to show you what you need to do. Here's the passage of scripture I want to read, though, because James not only tells us our need for wisdom and where we can find wisdom, but he tells us what wisdom looks like in everyday life. If you want to know if a person is a person of wisdom, James describes that person for us, how they respond in life. Listen to how he describes the person of wisdom here in this passage of scripture. He says, the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. It is also peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and good deeds. It shows no partiality and is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap harvests of goodness. What a great promise from the Lord about where we can get peace and what peace does to every one of us. I've often said this, every child, I believe, in this county deserves a good education, a quality education, deserves the opportunity. Let me put it that way. We can't force anybody to do anything, but they deserve a good education. They deserve an education so they can become productive citizens as a part of our county and a part of this country in which we live. And here's the reason we need wisdom. You and I need wisdom. And James talks about we need wisdom in times of trouble so we won't mess up what God wants to accomplish in our life. We need wisdom in the educational opportunities and the educational struggles of life. We need to look for wisdom from above so that we won't misuse or not use the opportunities and the potential that is before us. Let's pray together. Father, I pray today for myself and for those gathered here. I pray for wisdom. Father, I ask you for wisdom quite often because that's what Solomon prayed for. He prayed for wisdom, and you gave him wisdom, but you gave him even more. So, Father, I pray for wisdom so that I might lead your people. And I pray for the wisdom for those that are gathered here in this place of responsibility, a responsibility that they've taken on to oversee the educational system of this county which we love. May we, as leaders and servants, seek the wisdom that comes from above so that we can be the right kind of people, making the right kind of choices and decisions, not only for ourselves, but for those we care about as well. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Harold. Next, we need Mr. Bobby down on action items. We need a motion. Well, hang on a minute. The North Carolina DOT amended contracts is being taken off. I need a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. Mr. John Simmons made the motion. Mr. Henry Brewer made the second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Approval of the minutes of the open session. I need Mr. John made the motion. Ms. Melissa Ocean, made the motion. Ms. Melissa made the second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Information items. Public Schools Robeson County Board of Education Silver Award. Dr. Williamson. Is it in here to you?
Mr. Chairman, board members, let me ask all board members if you would come forward, please, and line up across the front. As elected officials, Board of Education members, you are aware that you are required by the North Carolina School Boards Association to obtain training hours. You have done that, and so tonight you're going to be awarded the Silver Bell Award for your continuing education training.
Next is information items. Public Schools of Robeson County, 2022, 2023 test results, Ms. Wendy Dorsey Carr. Go. Lewis, Ms. Lewis.
Good evening, Chairman Lawson, Superintendent Williamson, and board members. I'm happy to report this year, again, Public Schools of Robeson County is making gains toward regaining the learning loss sustained during COVID-19. Our students' overall improvements in grade level proficiency and career and college readiness during the 2020-23 school year was significant. Grade level proficiency, those level 3s, 4s, and 5s of our students increased from 31.1 to 35.9. And our career and college readiness, those level 4s and 5s increased from 16.5 to 19%. Overall English improvements went up by 3.8 points. Math improvements went up by 6.4 percentage points. High School Math 1 improved by 6.4 percentage points. Math 3 improved by 10.7 percentage points. High School Biology increased by 9.6 points. And High School English 2 increased by 1.1 percentage points. Overall, 72% of the public schools of Robeson County met or exceeded growth during the 2022-23 school year. Still, our district remains on the low-performing district list due to 22 schools identified as low performing. As a reminder, a low-performing district is a district where 50% or more of its schools are identified as low performing. A low-performing school is a school with a school performance grade of a D or F and a school growth status of not met growth or met expected growth. What is encouraging is that 35 of our 36 schools either maintained or improved their school performance grade. This year, we had 9 schools that earned a letter C grade. We had 1 school that earned a letter B, and then 1 school that earned a letter A. We, the public schools of Robeson County, attribute these accomplishments to our staff, students, and the new curriculum. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
Anybody got any questions? Okay. Dr. Emanuel?
I congratulate all the schools that made growth and those that, all of them that worked really hard, and I think they all did. Somebody could answer this question. It might be Dr. Carr. What will happen as far as resources from the state now? What's going to happen to us this year, if anything?
There's no changes as far as resources. So the 4 CSI schools that we had last year stay CSI schools for 3 years. So they will maintain the funding they receive and the extra support that we provide them through that funding. And then we still have our state support with our 3 DPI coaches that have been with us that are part of the relay model that we did with DPI. And so as far as that, our resources pretty much stay the same. We do continue with the work with relay and the implementation of all the curriculums as is right now.
But no more added on to what we're doing, hopefully.
No, nothing else is being added.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else? Title VI follow-up. Philip Oxendine, Ms. Jennifer Freeman, and Dr. Wendy Dorsey Carr.
Good evening, Chairman Lawson, Superintendent Williamson, and board members. Just want to give a brief update on some of the work that we've been doing with Title VI. We recently had a in-house meeting with our consults from, if you would pull up the sheet that's on your desk, it's highlighted in orange. It's an email and then a official letter from DPI. Both of those have some orange sections highlighted. If you pull those up, we'll be going through that briefly. We want to talk about why we have the consultation. We have $40,000 or more for Title VI funds that qualifies us to apply all of our Title VI requirements to all of our additional titles as well. So within our consolidated application, you'll see the first paragraph highlighted in orange. We now have a place to upload our documentation for the ongoing consultation that we have with the tribe. That's now a part of all of our consolidated titles. Additionally, through that meeting, in this email, I met with Mr. Alex Charles, the interim senior director, and also Laura Pop, the federal programs administrator at NCDPI. They stated that the public schools of Robeson County shared meeting minutes from district improvement team meetings, which included representation from the Lumbee tribe, as well as additional documentation. They encouraged us to continue that work, expand upon it based on some feedback that we received in that meeting, and we intend to do just that. The second portion is a additional follow-up that we received on August the 30th from Mr. Alex Charles, and it indicated that the consultation requirements for Title VI become a requirement for all of our ESSER grants. And as I just stated, that is now a place that we can document that in our CCIP, or our Continuous Curriculum Improvement Plan. The last part I want to mention is the link below details what is federally required for the consultation process for Title VI, which now becomes a component for all of our titles through ESSA.
So, Philip, I want to make clear that the public and everyone in the room understand. So the ongoing conversation about consultation has been that we have not done that according to the federal and DPI definition. They say we have, and what they recognize, there was a problem with the application, that there was no place to upload the documentation. We're constantly saying we have that, take a look at it. That was the intent of the meeting. They recognized it in the first federal audit with no finding. So as a result of the conversation, they have now fixed the application that we can automatically upload all that documentation, correct?
Correct.
Which again was not part of the application last year.
It was not a part of that
Okay.
application in 22, 23, but it is now a part of 23, 24. We have since uploaded those required documents. They have been reviewed and approved through DPI, and our funding has been awarded for this fiscal school year.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Mr. Terry?
Thank you, Mr. Phillip, for this update. Thank you for all your hard work on this, and I want to thank Ms. Jennifer too as well. I want to thank Dr. Connie. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make this happen. And you just don't snap your fingers and get this work done. So I noticed that we do have, well, let me go to this letter first. There's a few, this letter can be translated in a few different ways. You can read it however you want to, but I don't see where it says you're doing a wonderful job. Keep up the good work. I mean, I think we're probably checking the box in terms of compliance. But here, there's a sentence here I really want you to take note of, and that sentence is the second paragraph right under the link. We would welcome the opportunity to support the public schools of Robeson County to ensure that everything is in order prior to submitting this application for funds for next year, so there is not a holdup in your application's approval for FY '24. So read that again and digest it. They're basically saying, we're here to help. If there's any issues, we're here to help. Submit your application early. Let us take a look at it so there's not any holdup. But as the public schools of Robeson County, we have a duty. We have a government-to-government relationship with the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. And the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina consists of an administration, an elected chairman, and a elected field of board members. So they're all elected officials, just as we are on this board right here. We're all elected officials. It's a government-to-government relationship between this government and that government. We, as one-sided, do not have the authority to say, we don't have the authority alone to determine whether or not we are complying with tribal consultation The tribe, if the tribe comes up and says, we don't feel like we're being consorted with, in particular, if you take note on the email, it includes not only Title VI, but also Titles 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that we have to show documentation that there's consultation going on. We don't have the authority in a vacuum to say, oh yeah, we're complying, until this board, as a group of elected officials, and the group from the tribe get together as another group of elected officials and say, okay, we're all rowing in the same direction. Until that happens, I just can't, we don't have the authority to say that in a vacuum. But anyway, I have a question, Mr. Oxendine or Miss Jennifer, or whoever may be able to answer it. I know that there's a deadline coming up to when we have to submit the 506 forms for the children. Okay, Miss Dr. Carr, do we have, and that's coming up in like October, I think, do we have a comparison of where we are in terms of numbers on our 506 forms now versus where we were last year? Because I'm hearing, mumblings about we may not be, we may not have the same number that we had at this time last year. We've got to get those in because that's our funding. Do we have a sense of where we are on those?
Mr. Terry, we're talking about Title VI follow-up. That's where we need to stay on. If you've got any other questions, you need to direct them to the assistant superintendents.
So the 506 form is directly related to Title VI.
But it's not in our subheading what we approved as the agenda. So if there's another one that you want to talk about, you need to bring it. You need to let us know prior to the meeting. You need to contact myself or the superintendent. We'll be glad to get in on the agenda and let you talk about it.
I apologize if that's an unfair question.
Okay?
Thank you.
Ms. Ocean?
But they're due by October, by the way, so we don't have a lot of time to play around. Just make sure that message gets out to the principal.
I'm sure they know when they're due. Hang on, Ms. Ocean, let me get you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have more a statement than a question. I may have every meeting that we've had for the last 3 months has been consistent with this tribal consultation and what is being inferred. I feel like if DPI is stating that we're in line, and our federal finding says that we're in line, there shouldn't be a question. When we, as a board, are supposed to be rowing this in the same boat. I'm not sure why we're not this passionate about all of our programs and all of our kids, but it's taking up so much time every meeting to go over the same thing over and over and over about what another entity determines as consultation. Consultation is defined by the federal government, is being taken or carried out by DPI. They've come, they've looked, they say that we're in line, and I interpret this as them saying next year, just have, when we're coming, just have your things in order, not saying that anything was out of order this time. And to continue to insinuate so makes it seem like we're doing something that's not ethical. And as for me, I'm at the point where I'm almost tired of hearing it. If there's something that we're not doing right, there are people that oversee these programs that will come in and tell us you're not doing it right. So until someone else besides the tribe says we're not doing it right, I think it's not fair to anyone on this board to keep having insinuations every meeting about the same thing. We can't infer what tribal consultation is because we're not in these positions. We're not assistant superintendents. We're not educators. I think we need to leave it to the educators or the people that have been trained to do so. Because it's starting to look bad every meeting that we're going on and on and on about this, making it seem as if we're wrong or we're doing something wrong. And I don't see where we've had any findings where we're culpable of anything, and I think it needs to stop.
Thank you. Mr. Gray?
Mr. Randy, and if I'm out of line, just let me know. Mr. Phillip, this on this paper, it says Title VI and requirement for all grants. There's more than just Title VI as far as parent involvement, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does this year take care of all the parental involvement requirements for the other different titles? You would have to tell me Title I, Title
We
II,
have
III.
parent advisory committees for our migrant population, our ill population, homeless population as well through McKinney-Vento, and
Okay.
also through Ms. Brennan. We have our parent advisory committee for the
Okay.
district as well.
Does this letter address all of those? Does it include all those or
It's not
just
specifically addressing
those others?
parent committees. It's
Okay.
how we comply with our consultation.
But we do have committees for. We have committees for those with parent representation.
The Title VI committee, I think Dr. Carr may be able to better address the Title VI committee.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. SB 49, Parents' Bill of Rights. Our attorney, Mr. Richard Schwartz. And prior to this, the workshop was going on and Mr. Richard went through some of this. So check out where he starts at, go back and inform yourself of what's going on with the Parents' Bill of Rights.
Okay, so one thing that, now that we got the full board here, one thing that I wanted to mention was your administrators went through this training about a week ago. So now we're doing it for the board. And for those who missed the first part, Parents' Bill of Rights is now law. Went into effect, the veto was overridden on August 16th. It became effective August 15th for most parts of this legislation. It's in 3 different parts, and the first part establishes a new chapter in the general statutes, chapter 114A, that details the Parents' Bill of Rights. And then part 2, which we're about to start going over right now, I'm gonna back up just a couple here. Part 2 is the section that amends the public school laws, chapter 115C. Anytime this refers to employees of the state, the way that's defined in this law is it includes employees of the public school unit as well, which is different from the way most of the statutes are written. So in part 2, we're dealing with parent guides and notifications. These are the pre-existing laws. I went over these earlier that deal with a lot of the stuff that's dealing with the Parents' Bill of Rights. So we have a lot of this already on the books before this was established. Here we have the underlying policy of the Parents' Bill of Rights for public schools. And this is a good policy statement that basically says we want to make sure that parents are involved in their child's education. And it also is empowering parents as well. So that's encouraging cooperation between the public school unit and parents to implement a well-planned, inclusive, and comprehensive program to assist parents and families in effectively participating in their child's education. The definitions are the same as in the first part of the bill for parent and child. A parent is somebody who's got a legal relationship to a child, not merely a caretaker. Principal is a principal or somebody who's the ranking person in the school. The school personnel include everybody, full-time, part-time, temporary, anybody who draws a paycheck. It does not include volunteers. It also includes independent contractors who carry out the roles of school employees, and the superintendent can include his designee. So now we get to what's included in, excuse me, part 2 of the Parents' Bill of Rights, which is the section that amends the public school laws. It adds a new Article 7B to Chapter 115C, the public school laws. And we're going to break this down, but these are the headings for the different sections that have been added to the law. So I'm not going to go over these right now because we're going to go over each one of them individually anyway. But this is kind of a table of that was kind of a table of contents for you. So here we get to the a real outline of what is designed and intended in here. And I want to spend a little bit of time going over this. So the priority for parental involvement in the schools is established in this section, this new section of the law, 115C 76.20. And it says all public school unit personnel shall, that's mandatory, fully support and cooperate in implementing a well-planned, inclusive, and comprehensive program to assist parents and families in effectively participating in their child's education. The public school unit shall comply with this part to do all of the following. So first is inform parents of their legal rights and responsibilities regarding their child's education. So we have to actively go out and inform parents of their legal rights. Second is provide a parent's guide for student achievement. This is new, a parent's guide for student achievement. This goes out annually to parents to give them information. So at the beginning of the school year, we send a lot of information home. If you're a parent, you've gotten a whole bunch of information at the beginning of the school year. We have to now provide a parent's guide for student achievement annually to give information to parents to let them know about their child's educational progress and how they can help their child succeed in school. So there's a lot that can be packed into that if you think about it. Okay, third is develop policies to effectively involve parents in their schools and their child's education. So that's the board's function. The board's going to have to develop policies. But as you'll see, you're going to have to wait for DPI on some of this. So the implementation of this, you're going to see in several parts as we're going along, is we are flying this plane and building it at the same time. The General Assembly is not, the Department of Public Instruction and the State Board of Education have asked the General Assembly to please postpone the effective date of this law. And we thought there might be some dispensation in the budget that we thought was going to come out this week from the General Assembly, but that's looking bleak right now. We were, as of yesterday, I was getting information from people that it was going to be postponed until January. As of today, the word I got was that's dead. It's not going to happen. So we'll see what happens. So we have a new 115 C76.25 parents' legal rights. So this is a lot. A lot of this is already in the law. Some of this is new. So first of all, they have the right to consent or withhold consent to participate in sex education. All right. So there was already the right to withhold consent. Now we have to give them the right to consent to sex education or withhold consent. There's the right to seek a medical or religious exemption from immunization requirements. That's already in the law. There's a right to review standardized assessment results testing as part of the state report card. They already had that right. Okay. The right to request an evaluation of their child for academically or intellectually gifted or identifying them as a child with a disability. They already had that right. Okay. So this is, we're having to make sure that they're aware of these rights. 5 is the right to inspect and purchase public school unit textbooks or other supplementary instructional materials. So this includes everything that's an instructional material. They have the right to access information relating to the school system's policies for promotion or retention. Well, that's public information anyway, okay? Including high school graduation requirements. That's all in your policy manual, all right? 7 is the right to receive report cards on a regular basis that clearly depict grades and attendance. We've been doing that anyway, right? 8 is the right to access information regarding the state education system, state standards, report card requirements, attendance requirements, and textbook requirements. 9 is the right to participate in parent-teacher organizations. We'd hope they'd be doing that, right? 10 is the right to opt in to certain data collection for their child. 11 is the right to participate in protected student information surveys only with parental consent. That's already in the law, all right? And then 12, and this is a big one, the right to review all available records of materials their child has borrowed from a school library. All right, now, there's a separate statute that's not in the public school laws that makes library information protected, okay? So that if you go to the public library and you're checking stuff out and you're looking over your shoulder to see who's seeing what you're checking out, you know, you don't have to worry about anybody getting those records because they're not public records. They're exempt from public records so that you can check out anything you want from the library or look at anything you want from the library. Now parents have the right to review all available records of material the child has borrowed from the school library. All right, so throughout these materials, what I've done is I've stuck in here the summaries from the School Boards Association Policy Listening Service with their recommendations for policies that will need to be changed and the changes that will need to be made in these policies in order to comply with this new law. So here you've got 4720 surveys of students will need to be amended. All right, the next one of these statutes, 115C 76.30, is, I'm sorry, this is that same statute. I'm sorry, 7630, I'm sorry, we're moving on to 7630, excuse me. Here we go. All right. This is a parent's guide for student achievement. So the state board has to develop minimum requirements for school systems to use in creating parent guides for student achievement to be provided to parents in writing at the beginning of each school year and to be discussed at a meeting of parents, teachers, and students. So now you not only have to send this home, but there has to be a meeting of parents, students, and teachers. So this was in effect at the beginning of this school year, but the guidelines from the State Board of Education don't exist. Okay, so this is one of these, we're building it and flying it at the same time. And these are the things the State Board at a minimum has to include in this parent's guide for student achievement. They've got to show promotion requirements, course of study, textbooks, other instructional material, child's progress towards proficiency, qualifications of their teachers, including licensure, school entry requirements, including immunization, parent actions that can strengthen a child's progress and emphasize school-home communication, services available such as tutoring and mentoring and advising, opportunities for parent participation, and to learn about their potential participation in rigorous academic programs, so more advanced courses, educational choices available. So this guideline for student achievement has to include educational choices available, not just in the public schools, but non-public school choices within public schools, along with scholarship grants. Rights of students with disabilities, contact information for the school system, and resources for student health, including immunization schedules and information about meningitis, and so on. The next statute, 115C 76.35, deals with parental involvement. And what we've got to do now is, again, consult with parents, teachers, and administrators to do all of these things that we just went through. This is the recommendation for policy change, policy 3210, parental inspection and objection of instructional materials. 7640 is another new statute. And this is that the school board has to establish procedures. And anytime you see procedures in this statute, what they really mean is policies. So this is the school board has to establish procedures, excuse me, for the submission of information requests and appeals. So here's what this deals with. A parent may submit a written request to the principal for any of the information that they have a right to under this new law. And then within 10 business days, the principal either has to provide that information or ask for an extension. But in any event, has to comply with that information request within 20 days. If the principal denies the request or doesn't respond to it within the timeline, the parent can submit that written request for information to the superintendent, along with a statement saying that the principal either denied or failed to comply in a timely manner. If the superintendent doesn't supply the information, then that parent may appeal to the school board within 20 business days of the date of submitting the request to the superintendent. And then the school board has to put this on your agenda for the next meeting that's at least 3 business days after the appeal was filed. And then your decision is final and it can't be appealed to the courts, right? So that's a procedure for dealing with parent requests for information. All right, there's also notifications dealing with student physical and mental health. We have to adopt policies to notify a parent at the beginning of each school year of healthcare services offered at the school and how to access it. And also that the means for the parent to provide consent for any specific service. A parent's consent to healthcare does not waive their right to access to educational records or health records, or to be notified of changes in the services for the child. At the beginning of each school year, we have to provide parents procedures for remedies that are listed in a statute we're going to get to in a second. It's the new 115C76.60. Prior to administering in grades K through 3, prior to administering any questionnaire about health or well-being or screening, we have to give parents the means for consenting to the use of the questionnaire for their child. All right. Prior to or contemporaneous with changes or notice of changes of services or monitoring dealing with the child's mental or physical or emotional health or well-being, we have to provide that information. And then prior to any changes in the name or pronoun used. Okay, so this is part of the don't say gay part. Okay, prior to any changes in the name or pronoun a student wants to use, we have to notify the parent of the change. Now, a couple of years ago, in March of 2021, DPI changed Power School and said, you can call yourself whatever you want. Okay, if you're a kid, you can enter that name in Power School and that will be what we'll refer to you as. All right, now it doesn't change your official transcript or anything, but it changes what you're referred to. So if Bobby decides that from now on he wants to be known as Bobby the Great and Powerful, okay, that's his new nickname. All right, so it could be Robert becomes Rob, or Robert becomes Bob, or Robert becomes Bobby, or something like that. Or it could be Melissa becomes Marvin, okay, or something like that. Not likely, but could happen. I guess maybe not. Or it could be, I had a friend in high school who insisted on everybody calling him Mr. Wonderful. And he even had his letter jacket, had it put on the back of his letter jacket, Mr. Wonderful, because he said that's what the ladies called him. Okay, that was just in his mind. Wasn't really the case. So he could have called himself Mr. Wonderful. So, but it could be anything. But this deals really with pronouns. Okay, that's what this is aimed at. Yes.
So we're saying basically like beginning of the year when we get the school packet, so the kids will choose, like my job, they do the she, he, her, they, them, they get to choose now.
Well, no, that's not going to be in the school packet, but they can do that. This is the pronoun. So now what we're saying is, if the kid goes to anybody in the school and says, instead of he, him, his, I'd rather go by, she, her from now on. Okay. Or she, okay, non-binary, whatever. If I want to make that change and I ask my teachers or anybody to call me by that pronoun now, parents have to be notified. Okay. So the parents have to be notified of that. Okay, and that's causing some consternation among the LGBTQ plus community and others. It's causing some consternation among school officials as well. Where and how far does that go? Changes in the name or pronoun used for a student. If we've got, if we've got 4 girls in the class named Allison, and we're going to call, you Allison, and you Allie, and you Al, and you number 4, okay? Does that count? That's obviously not what this is after, okay? But does that count? Do we have to notify parents of that? The procedures have to be adopted by the school board to implement this. You have to adopt policies to implement this. Skip, yeah, okay. And then in accordance with the first part of this law, Chapter 1, the new Chapter 114A, the procedures have to include a requirement that school personnel do one or both of these things, and that encourage a child to discuss issues dealing with their well-being with their parent and facilitate those discussions. So school officials have to encourage a child to discuss issues dealing with their own well-being with their parent, Okay. And now you may have a kid who comes and says, look, I can't talk about this with my parents. My parents don't understand. My parents don't get it. If I bring this up, I'm going to get in trouble or, worse. Well, our school officials now have to facilitate those discussions with the parent. And a lot of school officials, a lot of school employees are not going to be comfortable doing that or have the skills to do that in some instances, depending upon what that discussion entails. So this is a tricky one to navigate. Next, the procedure shall not prohibit parents from accessing any of their child's education or health records, except when a reasonably prudent person would believe that that disclosure would result in the child becoming an abused or neglected juvenile. Okay, so if it would endanger the child, then it can be withheld. Next, the school system shall not adopt any policies or forms that prohibit school employees from notifying a parent about their child's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being, or any changes in services or monitoring, or that encourage or have the effect of encouraging a child to withhold from their parent any information dealing with their mental, emotional, physical health or well-being, or any changes. So we can't adopt any policies preventing that. And then school personnel shall not discourage or prohibit parent notification of and involvement in critical decisions affecting mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being. So it's really basically saying that all belongs in the province of the parents. Anything dealing with a child's physical, mental, emotional health or well-being belongs in the province of the parents, and school folks are not supposed to keep that information from them and are supposed to make sure that they're aware of that information and facilitate any discussions. All right, support services training, student support services training has to be developed or provided by a school system to school personnel, and they have to adhere to guidelines developed by DPI on this. Well, those guidelines don't exist yet, okay? So that's another reason why DPI has been asking for changing this. Once DPI develops those guidelines, they may very well have to be approved by the State Board of Education, depending upon what they are, but they'll send guidelines out to the school systems, and then you're probably going to have to revise your policies to comply with those guidelines. But again, this is all in effect right now, even though the guidelines don't exist. All right, the next one deals with age-appropriate instruction for grades K through 4. Now, there was a revision to this law, this legislation, that popped out of a committee and popped right back and kind of disappeared. It was on the table for about 3 seconds and then it disappeared. And it was a much bigger law than this, much more elaborate than this. And it would have made this go to grades K8. But now it's K4. And so we'll see what happens with that piece of legislation that popped up and disappeared, probably in future iterations of the General Assembly. But what this says is that there shall not be any instruction dealing with sexuality or sexual activity in grades K4, regardless of whether the information is provided by school personnel or third parties. And for purposes of this section, curriculum includes everything, okay? The standard course of study, any locally developed curriculum, any supplemental instruction or materials, but it does not include responses to student-initiated questions, okay? So if a kid brings it up, then it's okay to just respond to the question, all right? So this is just it's a prohibition on what we put out there, not what the kids come up with. So this is one of the policies that will have to come up. So this is an example of how this could come up in class. So we'll run this here.
Families, I know you love that. So we're gonna start with words that end in AN. You yell out a word, I'll write it down. Let's see how many we can get. Go!
Fan.
Fan, there's a good one. Man, that's another one.
Lesbian.
Words that end in AN. Anyone, words ending in AN.
Lesbian.
Okay, I heard pan. Good.
No, Faith said lesbian.
All right, no big deal. Faith said lesbian. Hold on. Good, we'll write that down. Just a word, not a big deal, but we'll move on. We'll get some other ones.
What is a lesbian, sir?
What's your word? How do you? All right. If you liked another girl, that could be.
I like Olivia. Am I a lesbian?
Well, if you like Olivia, you could be, sure.
I like Olivia. I love Olivia. I like Olivia too. Am I a lesbian?
No, it doesn't work that way, Philip. You can never be a lesbian.
No fair. I want to be a lesbian. Me too.
We can all be lesbians. Okay, let's just move on. Let's try words that end in ON.
Prostitution.
What did you say?
Prostitution. What is prostitution?
What is prostitution? Let's say prostitution is when you work in the street and you get paid.
I want to do prostitution.
No. All right. Moving on to words that end in RE, but let me just have a second here to think if nothing, there can't be. So shout out words that end in RE.
Crack whore.
Okay, so anyway, all right, so just to be clear, those were student-initiated questions, okay, and the teacher would not get in trouble for that, all right? So that's the difference. It's the teacher's putting it out or the students are putting it out. All right, so that's been a big source of concern and trepidation on the part of some teachers is, you know, by the time you get the kids in grades K-4 ask questions sometimes. They're curious sometimes. They hear things. They don't know what they mean. They say things and they don't know what they mean. So if the kid brings it up, it's okay. The teacher's not going to get in trouble. It's the teacher-initiated stuff that needs to be, that's prohibited by this law. All right, we move on to 7660, parental concerns. So under this new law, there's an expedited process to respond to parent concerns. And the school district has 30 days within which to respond to parental concerns. Now, this particular section was really the subject of a lot of consternation on the part of the State Board of Education. You'll see why. The chairman and vice chairman of the State Board of Education wrote a letter to the General Assembly and said, please change this because we don't have any jurisdiction here and this is a mess. And their concerns were not really heeded. So here's the deal. If the district doesn't respond within 30 days to a parental concern, it has to provide a written notification of why the concern wasn't addressed within 30 days. And then a parent, if they want to, they have two different choices. They can file a lawsuit or they can file a complaint with the State Board of Education and ask for a parental concern hearing. All right, this is any parent concern, okay? And if it goes to the State Board of Education, they have to appoint an attorney as a hearing officer. And that person has to conduct a hearing in accordance with rules established by the State Board, which don't exist yet, okay? So that's another set of rules that don't exist. And then the hearing officer has to do a fact finding and make a determination related to the dispute with the school system, whatever the practice is that's being complained about by the school system, and consider any information provided by the school system and make a recommended resolution to the State Board of Education within 30 days. All right? And then the State Board has to either approve or reject that recommendation at its next regularly scheduled board meeting, as long as they've got 7 days before the board meeting to get this on the agenda. And then the school system has to pay the costs for the attorney who was the hearing officer. All right. Now, the State Board of Education said, we don't have any jurisdiction over what goes on in local school systems to tell them what to do on a lot of the stuff that might be the subject of this parental complaint. And then the parents also have the choice of just filing a lawsuit against the school system instead of going to the State Board of Education. And they can ask for what's called the declaratory judgment against the school system. That is, we want the judge to just rule based on the information provided against the school system. And then the court has the authority to order injunctive relief. Injunctive relief is a court order saying either do this or stop doing this, depending upon what's going on. Okay, directing the school system to do or stop doing something. And the court shall award attorney's fees and costs to a parent who gets injunctive relief. So this could create a whole cottage industry of people suing school districts because the attorneys, if they win, know they're going to get paid on this. Court's going to order relief on this. All right. Moving on to the next section, 76.65, parent rights to opt in. This deals with protected information surveys, which are any information dealing with political affiliations or religious beliefs or mental and psychological problems or income that's not related to whether you qualify for benefits or sex behavior or lots of other information. And it says that the school system has to make available to parents and adult students at least 10 days prior to the administration of a protected information survey and give them opportunities to review the survey and the full text of that protected information survey. And no student is permitted to participate in one of these surveys prior to getting an opt-in from the parent. All right. Reporting requirements. Every school system annually by September 15th, including this September 15th, which is 4 days away, has to provide this information to the State Board of Education in a format designated by the State Board of Education, which doesn't yet exist. Okay. So in 4 days, you got to, 3 days, you got to submit that. So you got to give them the most current version of your policies and procedures that have been adopted in accordance with this section of the Parents' Bill of Rights and show any changes from the prior year. And then you also have to include the number of appeals that you've had under the previous section that we talked about and the number of parental concern hearings that you had and what the outcome was. And so you got to report on how you're implementing the Parents' Bill of Rights. And then the State Board of Education has to compile a report and submit that to the General Assembly showing the report for every school system that it got and summary data dealing with all of that. There is an exemption in here. It says that by June 30th of this current school year, DPI shall review and update as necessary school counseling frameworks and standards, education practical and professional conduct principles, and practices and conduct principles and other student services and personnel guidelines, standards, or frameworks. So that covers a lot of ground. If you think about the requirements for teachers and counselors and social workers and school librarians and everything else that are included in the evaluation instruments and the standards that they have to deal with children, all of that has to be reviewed by DPI by the end of the current school year and updated to comply with this act. So here's a summary of part 2 of the act dealing with parental guides and notifications. We just went over all of this stuff. So there's a summary of it. The next section here is part 3, and this deals with parental authorization for healthcare for minors. I'm not going to go through this in as much detail as I did for part 2, which is the changes to the public school laws, because this deals with medical treatment. This section of the law goes into effect December 1st. So this is not yet in effect, but these are pre-existing laws governing the treatment of minors. And what this law says is, this is the summary of, we'll skip to the summary of this. There are some serious penalties for violations of this, but here's the summary of the key additions to existing law. It creates a new section in Chapter 90 of the General Statutes, and it prohibits healthcare practitioners from providing or soliciting or arranging treatment for minors without first getting written consent from the parents, except when with getting that consent would, or delay, any delay in getting that consent would result in endangering the life or creating a healthcare crisis for the child. Healthcare facilities are prohibited from allowing treatment of minors without first getting written or documented parental consent. So this deals with things like hormone treatment and therapy and other such things. This is a suggestion on policy changes for student health services. And now we get to the very end here, some questions, concerns, and unknowns about this law. A lot of the questions or concerns deal with some of the ambiguous or vague language. There are some people who think that the language is deliberately left ambiguous in some cases so that it might have the effect of deterring people from going up to the line if you don't know where the line is. And that's the chilling effect that some people are complaining about with this legislation. That is, again, if you don't know where the line is and whether you're going to go over the line or cross the line or step on the line, then you back up from the line, and you might back up quite a bit from the line. So it might have a chilling effect on communications and teaching in the classroom and so on. There's the potential for the expansion of the law, and that potential was seen in that bill that I mentioned that popped out of committee and popped right back and went quite a bit further than this law. And there's confusion because of the timelines in this and what's required to be done. This is in effect now. The regulations haven't been developed. Nobody's adopted the policies. There are deadlines that can't possibly be met because of the requirement for immediate implementation. And we can expect litigation. So there are several states that have adopted parents' bills of rights, and there's litigation all over the board, particularly about the pronoun stuff. There's just a ton of litigation going on in other states and other jurisdictions right now, dealing with this and how it gets implemented and who has what rights. And does a teacher or a professor, suppose they a student says, that you're infringing upon my rights because I can't use this pronoun or I can't use it without my parents' permission. And what about a teacher who doesn't want to use the pronoun that's been approved by the parent and says, this is against my religious beliefs? And what about, so there's a case going on right now, just for example, where a professor objected to using the preferred pronouns that students in his class had. And the accommodation, he said it was against his religious beliefs because his religious beliefs are that, God created men and women, and, that I'm not going to call you anything other than the pronoun that goes along with what's on your birth certificate. So some students felt that they were being disrespected by that, and that their rights were being violated. So the accommodation that was reached for his religious beliefs was to call everybody by their last name. Okay, so that you'd be Emmanuel instead of Ms. Emmanuel or Mr. Emmanuel, would just be Emmanuel. Okay, and you'd be Lowry. Okay, and the students said, no, that's a Title IX violation because it's clear that what you're trying to do is avoid the sexual designation that I should be entitled to. And so the professor was disciplined, and that case has gone up and it's been overturned and it's been swished around, and it's gone up on appeal a couple of times now. And that's, just one example, but there are many, many, many examples of litigation all over the country right now. And it's coming and going in every possible direction. And if you go to the Fifth Circuit down in Texas, you're going to get one result. If you go to the Ninth Circuit out in California, you're going to get a different result. And who knows what the Fourth Circuit's going to do where we are. So lots of different things going on here. You can expect litigation. We're not going to be any different from every other state that's adopted these laws. So pay attention. We haven't seen the last of this. All right. Anybody have any questions?
I have a question, have a comment. They certainly, They certainly weren't original. They just sort of copied Florida's and just wrote it to us.
There's a lot of this that's based on the Florida law. But this is, a lot of this legislation is, it's passed around through groups like ALEC. Their model legislation, there's model legislation that gets passed around from state to state to state, and it's slightly modified as it goes through the sausage factory, the legislative process, and, comes out.
This
All
means
right.
we have to increase your pay with all this litigation.
It'll happen, yeah.
Also that you, brought this before the principals, during their,
Yeah, we had
Beginning
this,
of the
last
year.
week, we had a workshop with the principals and your other administrators. And so they suffered through the longer version of this.
Right.
So,
thank you, sir.
all right, thank you.
Mr. Terry?
I just have a quick question for you, the administration. I know this is brand new, these laws, but is there, do we anticipate any concerns in terms of our curriculum that we have, particularly for the K-4? Do we anticipate if we just, take a look at this law the way it's written, do we anticipate maybe having to modify our current curriculum in any way?
You're asking the attorney that, correct?
No, I was just the administration.
It's a state curriculum.
Oh, wait a minute. Dr. Carper?
No, Mr. Terry, at this time, there's nothing in the curriculum that would have to revise in the, based on the law.
Okay, thank you.
But I want to comment on that. Also, we wrote from a state curriculum, so wouldn't it have to come from the state?
I'm sorry, I meant materials.
Materials.
Material, that's the word, yeah. So there's nothing in our current material. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Henry?
Mr. Swartz, just for clarity for our administration and staff, teachers, if a child's their life may be in danger, say they swallowed something incorrectly or something, how does this new bill affect them?
They, just to be clear, they would not have to wait to get parental permission if your waiting would, cause harm to the child. They'd still be expected to act.
Okay. Everybody good? Public comment? We have none. I would like to mention that, Dr. Williamson, our superintendent for the public schools of Robeson County, was appointed, by Governor Roy Cooper, to the Board of Trustees, the Center of Advanced Teachers. Wish you well on that, and congratulations. Thanks for reminding me, Dr. Manning. Action items, mental health plan. Ms. Jadelle Hawks.
Good evening, Chairman Lawson, Superintendent Williamson, and board members. What we have to present this year to you is the district mental health plan. There weren't a lot of changes. I just want to kind of go over a couple of highlights in reference to policy SHLT 003 on K-12, school mental health training. Nothing's changed. We're in phase 4 where we're ongoing with all of our training. For implementation, that looks like for our district, for awareness and education within the youth mental health, suicide prevention, substance abuse, teenage dating violence, and in even number years, which is coming up, we're in the process of developing that training, is child sexual abuse prevention and sex trafficking prevention. So currently, at the end of this month, we will roll out the 6-hour training course for our new staff that has just been hired in that they're required to have, those that I just listed, 6 hours of training, 2 hours of ongoing training for our current staff members because they've already had that initial 6 hours of training from when they were hired in for the district and when this was implemented. And then also in that even number year, which will be next year, we're in the process of the 2-hour training that they're required to have for those. The memorandum that was at the very end, that is our understanding with our LME and our LMCO. At the very end, we have 23 providers. This year, we had another one added on. So what you have in the very back is not the updated one. We have one other provider that was added on. So we do have that. It was rolled out to our student support staff, so they would have that to provide to parents. Do you have any questions?
Tell me if I've got it in the wrong place, Mr. Deal. In the mental health plan, there are times when children, the regular school setting is not what they need for their mental health. I don't see where you have the LAP program. What's there, the RAS program or the LAP in here? Am I missing it someplace? I see where you got CTE, course of study. Tell me why I'm missing that. Sometimes you have to put children in a different setting. Is it near any place?
I don't think it's identified in here. That's based on when the students come in, what their treatment plan and goals would look like, that we would discuss that with them as options for accommodations for them if they require a small setting.
Okay, I guess, is there some place, what do you mention alternative? Not saying it's not here, I'm not familiar with the plan, okay? Do you mention alternative settings in here any place?
It wouldn't be under alternative settings or alternate settings. It would be where, I'm gonna have to go back and look and reference exactly where we could put that out, to be honest with you.
That would be my recommendation because it is, it might be homebound. It might for temporary time. It might be alternative settings. It might be RAS lab for 2 weeks, 6 weeks. That's the only thing I'm asking. Is it in here? And it could be, and I just don't know.
The place that we could put it, Dr. Emmanuel, would be under the Tier 2 services with MTSS when we're looking at the PSRC crisis response team or anything that we do with those children.
Yeah.
When something comes up and we're aware of them needing a treatment or an accommodation, that we
Yeah.
would put it there for them for under MTSS for an accommodation.
Well, sometimes you have to take a child out of the environment. I mean, you've known for doing that, which is good for the child. Mr. Chair, I recommend approval with that addition, if it's okay with the fellow board members and the superintendent.
Dr. Manuel's made a motion. Mr. Henry seconded that we approve it with the additions Dr. Manuel mentioned. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Ms. Thompson, Kelly Education. Oh, no. That's all.
Good evening, Chairman Lawson, Superintendent Williamson, all members of the board. At this time, I'd like to talk to you about the addendum to the agreement for Kelly Education. In your packet, you received the addendum itself. And as you know, there was conversation around dual employment. We had employees in the past who were bus drivers as well as substitutes. And at one point, it looked as if we were leaning to them only being able to provide one service. But with this addendum from Kelly Education, we are allowing those people to be dual employees. And this just says that if there is any overtime to be paid, that PSRC will accept that responsibility. And this is nothing new. This is something we've always done in the past, that bus drivers were also able to be substitutes and vice versa. So at this time, we're asking approval for the addendum.
Mr. Brewer,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the addendum for Kelly Education.
I've got Mr. Henry making the motion, Mr. Trey Britt with a second, to approve the Kelly Education addendum. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Erica with the monthly financial report.
Good evening again, Chairman Lawson, Superintendent Dr. Williamson, and board members. I've included in your packet the monthly financial report, and I can answer any questions anyone has concerning that document.
Mr. Simmons,
Ms. Erica, has anything changed?
No, sir, unfortunately, no.
I make a motion to approve the monthly report.
Second that motion.
okay. Mr. John Simmons made a motion to approve the monthly financial report. Mr. Henry, Mr. Craig, I'm sorry, Mr. Craig Lowry made the second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Miss Erica on fundraisers.
I did want to add that in your original packet, Littlefield Middle was not included, and we did add that and put that at your chair tonight. I wanted to make sure that got in because the start date of their fundraiser is towards the end of September, but that's the only change, those three schools.
Okay. Mr. Vontae's made a motion to approve the fundraisers. Mr. Henry Boers made a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Miss Erica on cafeteria benefits, contract renewal with the Pierce Group.
Yes, sir, you received a copy of that contract as well, and we'd like to answer any questions anyone has concerning that contract.
Mr. John Simmons,
This is basically the same contract we always approve.
Correct.
I make a motion to approve the contract.
okay, I've got Mr. John Simmons making the motion to approve the cafeteria benefit contract renewal by the Pierce Group. I've got Mr. Henry Brewer with the second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Trey Britt. I got you.
I move that the Board of Education for the Public Schools of Robeson County go into closed session for the purposes of discussing certified and classified personnel, North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A1 and 6, and to consult with the attorney retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the Board of Education for the Public Schools of Robeson County, North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 3, and to consider student matters are considered as well. North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 115C-402 and 20 U.S. Code 1232G.
Motion by Mr. Britt to go into closed session. I got Miss Melissa Ocean with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. We are now in closed session. Motion and a second to come out of closed session. I've got Trey making the motion and Mr. Henry with the second. Motion to come out of closed session. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Motion to approve closed session minutes. John Simmons makes the motion to approve closed session minutes. Mr. Craig with a second. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. I need a motion to approve personnel as presented. Mr. John Simmons made a motion to approve personnel as presented. Mr. Henry with the second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Have you got anything?
Nope, that's it.
He's good. I need I've got John with a motion to adjourn, and I've got Miss Ocean with a second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. He said I didn't.
No, we're good in closed session with that.